5,000 XRP. That's the number that's about to separate two completely different financial futures. Not 500,000, not 50,000, just 5,000. And here's the part nobody's talking about. The window to get there is closing faster than most people realize. Institutions are already moving. The supply is already shrinking. And by the time the mainstream finally wakes up to what XRP is actually becoming, 99% of people will have already missed their shot. The question is, are you in that 1%? Welcome back to XRP Pulse Report, the channel where we break down everything happening in the world of XRP so you stay ahead of the curve. I'm glad you're here today, because what we're talking about in this video is something that I genuinely believe is going to stop a lot of people in their tracks. The headline says it all. 99% of people will never own 5,000 XRP. Now, when I first saw that, I'll be honest, I had to sit with it for a second, because it sounds bold. It sounds almost like a scare tactic. But when you actually dig into the numbers, when you look at the data, when you understand what's happening with XRP right now and where it's potentially headed, that statement doesn't just hold up. It becomes one of the most important things any crypto holder needs to hear in 2025. So grab your coffee, sit down, and let's get into this properly. Let's start with the basics, because context matters here. XRP has a total fixed supply of 100 billion tokens. That number is set. It cannot be increased. It cannot be mined like Bitcoin. It's not going to inflate beyond that cap. Now, out of those 100 billion XRP, roughly 57 to 58 billion are currently in circulation. The rest is held by Ripple, which releases it periodically through a locked escrow system. That means the available supply, the XRP that regular people like you and me can actually go out and buy on exchanges, is not as massive as that 100 billion number might make it seem. When you divide that circulating supply among the entire global population, over 8 billion people, and you factor in how much is already locked up in institutional wallets, whale accounts, exchanges, and Ripple's own reserves, the amount of XRP that everyday retail investors can realistically accumulate starts looking a lot smaller very quickly. Now here's where the 5,000 XRP number becomes genuinely significant. 5,000 XRP is not some arbitrary milestone that someone pulled out of thin air. It represents what many analysts and long-term XRP community members call a life-changing stack. The idea is simple. If XRP reaches certain price targets that have been discussed seriously within the community, not fantasy numbers, but targets grounded in things like Ripple's expanding utility, institutional adoption, and potential settlement use cases, then holding 5,000 XRP could represent a financial position that genuinely changes a person's trajectory in life. We're not talking about getting rich overnight. We're talking about the kind of wealth accumulation that takes most people decades of traditional investing to build. 5,000 XRP at even a modest future valuation is a number worth paying very close attention to right now, while it's still within reach for many people. But here's the uncomfortable truth that most people scroll past without actually internalizing. The window to accumulate that kind of XRP stack is shrinking. And it's not shrinking slowly, it's shrinking in real time. Think about it this way. Every single day that passes, more institutional players are entering this space. More financial firms are looking at Ripple's technology. More countries are exploring cross-border payment solutions built on XRP's infrastructure. Every time one of those entities steps in and buys, they're not buying 100 XRP or 1,000 XRP. They're buying in quantities that move markets. They're absorbing supply that retail investors like us would otherwise have access to. So that 5,000 XRP that feels reachable today, that feels like something you could build toward over the next few months, becomes harder and harder to accumulate as price climbs and institutional demand continues to grow. Let's talk about Ripple for a moment. because you simply cannot talk about XRP without understanding what the company behind it has been building. Ripple has spent years developing payment infrastructure that connects banks and financial institutions across borders. Their products, RippleNet, on-demand liquidity, now rebranded as Ripple Payments. These are real, functioning systems being used by real financial institutions right now. This isn't vaporware. This isn't a white paper promise. Ripple has actual partnerships with hundreds of financial institutions across over 50 countries. And what sits at the heart of on-demand liquidity? XRP. It's used as a bridge currency to move value between different fiat currencies almost instantly and at a fraction of the cost of traditional correspondent banking. That real-world utility is what separates XRP from a massive percentage of other crypto projects out there. And that utility is exactly why the 5,000 XRP conversation matters so much. Now I want to address something that comes up every single time someone posts content like this. The skeptics who say the price predictions are unrealistic, that XRP is going nowhere, that Ripple's legal battles have permanently damaged the project. I understand that perspective, and I'm not here to dismiss people who have concerns. But let's be factually accurate here. In 2023, Ripple secured a landmark partial victory in its lawsuit against the SEC, with a judge ruling that programmatic sales of XRP on exchanges did not constitute securities offerings. That was enormous. That was a legal precedent that sent shockwaves through the entire crypto industry. And while the full legal situation is still evolving, the narrative that XRP is a dying project or a legally compromised asset is simply not supported by what's actually happening on the ground. Ripple is still expanding. They're still hiring. They're still signing new partnerships. The story is very much still being written. Here's another angle that doesn't get nearly enough attention when people talk about whether 5,000 XRP is achievable. Let's talk about the psychology of accumulation, and specifically why most people fail to build significant positions in any asset, not just XRP. The number one reason people don't accumulate is emotion. They buy when the price is pumping because excitement overrides logic. Then they panic sell when the price dips because fear overrides patience. This pattern plays out over and over again in every market cycle. The people who end up holding 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 XRP aren't necessarily the smartest people in the room. They're not the ones with the best insider information. They're the ones who had a plan, stayed disciplined, kept dollar cost averaging through the noise, and didn't let Twitter drama or YouTube comment sections shake them out of their position. That's it. The strategy isn't complicated. The execution is where most people struggle. Let's put some real numbers on the table, because this is a news channel and we deal in facts. At the time of this recording, XRP is trading at a price that still makes 5,000 XRP accessible for a lot of people, though not easy and certainly not free. 5,000 XRP at today's prices represents a meaningful financial commitment that requires real intentionality. It's not something you stumble into. But compare that to what 5,000 XRP could represent at higher valuations. And again, we're talking about valuations that serious analysts, not hype accounts, but people who study tokenomics and real-world adoption curves have pointed to as plausible over a multi-year horizon. And suddenly that upfront commitment looks very different in hindsight. The people who are going to look back in a few years and say, "I wish I had bought more," are sitting right here, right now, watching this video. The question is whether they're going to do something about it or just keep watching. I want to be very clear about something, because this is important to me and it should be important to you as a viewer of this channel. Nothing in this video is financial advice. We don't do that here. What we do is analyze publicly available information, discuss the XRP ecosystem honestly, and give you the context you need to make your own informed decisions. XRP is a volatile asset. All of crypto is volatile. Prices go up, prices go down, and anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying to you or selling you something. The point of this video is not to tell you to empty your savings account into XRP tomorrow morning. The point is to make sure you understand what's happening in this space, so that whatever decision you make, you're making it with your eyes open and your brain engaged, not based on hype or fear. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Because the 5,000 XRP conversation doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within a much larger story that's unfolding right now across the global financial system. There is a real, ongoing, institutional-level conversation about the future of cross-border payments. The traditional SWIFT system, the backbone of international banking for decades, is slow, expensive, and increasingly being challenged by newer technologies. Ripple is one of the companies positioned at the center of that disruption. And whether you believe XRP reaches $5, $10, or higher, the underlying premise remains the same. A technology that makes global money movement faster, cheaper, and more transparent is going to find its market. The only question is how large that market becomes, and how much of it Ripple is able to capture. Let's also touch on the scarcity angle one more time, because I think it genuinely doesn't sink in until you really visualize it. There are roughly 8 billion people on this planet. If you divide the entire circulating supply of XRP equally among every single human being alive today, each person would get approximately 7 XRP. 7. Not 7,000, not 700, 7. Now obviously that's a thought experiment and not how markets actually work, but it illustrates the point powerfully. XRP is not infinitely abundant. When you hear someone say that 99% of people will never own 5,000 XRP, they're not being dramatic, they're being mathematical. The math genuinely does not support the idea that everyone who wants 5,000 XRP is going to be able to get it, especially as awareness grows and demand increases while supply remains fixed. One of the things I hear a lot from people who are newer to XRP is the question, why 5,000 specifically? Why not 1,000? Why not 10,000? And it's a fair question. The 5,000 number is sort of organically emerged within the XRP community as a benchmark, because at various price targets that serious researchers have modeled, 5,000 XRP hits a particular threshold, the kind of number that, if those targets are reached, could represent life-changing money for a middle-class person, without requiring them to have been a millionaire to start with. It's aspirational, but not absurd. It's specific, but not arbitrary. It gives people something concrete to work toward, and in a space full of vague promises and moon talk, having a concrete, achievable right-now accumulation target is actually really valuable. It turns abstract investment thinking into real, actionable behavior. And look, here's how I want to close this out, because I think the most important thing you can take away from this video is not a price target or a headline number. It's a mindset shift. The people who will own 5,000 XRP in the future are not some special elite group with secret knowledge. They're the people who heard conversations like this one, who did their own research, who took the information seriously, and who made a decision to act with intention rather than drift along passively. The 99% figure isn't a judgment. It's not a put-down. It's a reflection of how most people interact with financial opportunity, which is to say, most people see it, feel something for a moment, and then go back to whatever they were doing before. The 1% who ends up on the other side of that stat are simply the ones who didn't do that. They paused, they thought, they planned, and they acted. If you're watching this channel, you already have more information than most. What you do with it is entirely up to you. Thank you for being here at XRP Pulse Report. Stay sharp, stay patient, and we'll see you in the next one.